Hello and welcome to On My Bookshelf, and in this episode we're going to be looking at Beyond Landscape by Hans Strand. If you've seen a photograph by Hans Strand before, you know he has a very distinctive style. That style very much focuses on composition, shape and texture, and quite often producing abstract images of the landscape. But because of that, that's the reason why I'm so interested in this book, because I like photography books that challenge my view on what a landscape photograph should be. Let's look at the physical aspects of the book first. It's a hardcover book. It measures 300mm by 240mm and is 120 pages long. It's printed on Fedrigoni matte paper. Along the front cover, the spine and the back of the book, all the text is done with silver foil, and it's a really nice touch. And inside the book, it goes on to say that Kozu Books printed this book using 100% renewable energy sources. Really nice to see. Not only are Kozu Books working with some really high profile photographers to produce some excellent photography books, but it's good to also see they're putting their green credentials forward as well. The book starts with a foreword by Bruce Percy, and then it's followed by an introduction by Hans himself, who goes on to talk about his style of photography, how he often excludes the horizon, very much focusing on geometry and texture, and quite often also shooting in overcast conditions. He very much likes the composition to do the talking in his photography. The book isn't split up into chapters or distinct collections of photographs, but that's not to say that this is a random collection of Hans's photographs. Far from it. A great deal of thought has gone into the curation and the layout of these images, because as you progress through the book, you can see how the photographs flow from one to the next and how different styles are combined or different locations are combined as well. But let's take a look at some of my favourite images from this book. This image here is a testament to how skillful Hans is with his composition and his camera technique. Because on the face of it, while this image may look reasonably easy to capture, these types of images are quite complex, quite difficult to get right. I know this because I've tried it myself a few times. Just recently, actually, a few weeks ago, I was in a cave trying to take a very similar picture, and it is way more difficult than it looks. So I really appreciate the work and the style of this photograph, because I know that he probably would have had to work quite hard on the composition and to get the right light, to get this aesthetic that comes clearly through in this particular photograph. But it's this image of slate that really stands out to me. It's a great example of the texture and geometry that Hans talks about in his introduction. It's hard to tell how big these bits of slate are, but it's definitely not a place I want to go walking over. It's not until you see a photograph like this that you can appreciate all the varied colours that slate has, and when it's put in this chaotic fashion and photographed, it's then that you realise how beautiful it can also be. Then there's this image of an icefall, which I find absolutely fascinating. It is full of texture and mystery. Though the primary colour is blue, you'll find that there is so much more than just a single shade. I didn't know you could get so many different shades of grey and blue. And the composition is superb, as it captures so much texture and contrast. But the one thing you can't tell is how big this scene is. There's a lack of scale in it. But I like that because it forces me to use my imagination to try and think what it would be like to stand on that ice shelf and look down into one of those massive crevices. When I look at this image of an iceberg, I can clearly imagine it being printed on a massive scale and hung on someone's wall, because it would make a wonderful piece of art for someone to look at. There is something fascinating about ice, and Hans has managed to capture this. The shapes, the colours, and the way the light reflects and penetrates it. He's managed to capture a view of an iceberg that we rarely see. I find photographs like this completely mesmerising, and only by reading the text do I even have an understanding of what these photographs might represent. They're called Braided River 1 and Braided River 2, so I'm assuming that they're rivers, but they're not rivers like I've ever seen before, and to me that's what makes them so interesting. As you look at those photographs, you look at those lines as they follow you through and you see all these patterns and textures, it's an absolutely mesmerising photograph. It's also almost impossible to understand the scale of what you're looking at, but for me that only enhances the wonder of this image. And though it's one of my favourite images, I do struggle to find the words to accurately describe it. It's an image that you really have to look at yourself. That's just a small example of the types of photographs that you can find within this book, but there is so much more to discover as well. There's lots of photographs from Iceland. It's something that's particularly close to my heart as I'm hoping to go there soon myself. There's a fine collection of intimate landscapes, and we get to see Hans working with trees and woodlands as well. The last few pages of this book contain 7 photographs captured from the Rio Tinto mine, which is one of the largest in the world. These images are striking and almost beautiful in an industrial kind of way. However, as Hans said in his introduction, the mining has contributed to the Rio Tinto mine becoming one of the most polluted in the world. So while these photographs are beautiful, rich in texture and colour, it's quite sad to know that it's come at such a cost to the environment. And this can be the power of photography, when people like Hans capture these images that can really highlight some of the damage that we are doing to our beautiful environment. So is this a book for your bookshelf? Well, for me personally, definitely is. I often say on my bookshelf that I like to get photography books that broaden my horizons. Not just different genres of photography, but even different styles and different approaches to landscape photography. And this book very much falls into that category. While these images aren't the type that I would personally photograph, I do find Hans' style fascinating. I can appreciate how carefully and expertly these images have been crafted. Hans shows you his mastery of contrast, texture, lines, colour and composition. Every photograph represents something new to learn that I can take into my own photography. But more than that, each photograph is a journey of discovery. This isn't a book to flick through, this is a book to savour, this is a book to enjoy, to explore. And that's why I've made room for it on my bookshelf. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of On My Bookshelf, and if you want to pick up a copy of Beyond Landscape by Hans Strand, you can do so directly from Kozu Books. I'll include a link for that in the video description below. But if you've got an extra few minutes, why not check out one of the other episodes of On My Bookshelf that I've got. I'm popping a playlist up in the corner of the screen. It's not just landscape photography books, there's all sorts of books in there as well, so there's bound to be something in there that might find its way onto your bookshelf. But until the next video, I'll see you then.